Have you ever wanted to make beautiful, rich compost, but it just was taking a little longer than you expected? Well, I've got a tip to not only making it faster, but making it easier with one simple ingredient. Check it out, let's go. Our compost is probably one of our most beneficial resources in the garden. Not only does it provide fertility in the form of fertilizer, nutrients for the garden, but it also provides beneficial growing medium for our plants to grow in. It's soil, it's alive, it's breathing, and it's so important for us to generate. And a lot of times, this compost is it's a smorgasbord, right? It's everything and anything that comes from our yard. We try to make it as locally as possible because that way not only do we know what's in our compost, but it's as closed loop as possible. Closed loop basically means that all the resources that are generating the compost came from on site. So we reduce how much we have to bring in from off site. And it just kind of helps us to be a little more self-sustainable, self-sufficient in our own little homestead here. And when it comes to what our compost consists of, it's got twigs and stuff from the previous growing season, old tomato plants, squash plants, pepper plants, whatnot. But it also has mulched up leaves. It's got mulched up grass clippings. It's got food scraps from the kitchen. And there's a wide variety of them, but there's never really a certain recipe. Yes, there is an ideal recipe, but ideal is not always what we can attain, right? It's not always ideal. If you've gardened for any length of time, ideal is something we strive for, but not something we ever attain. You shoot for the stars, at least if you miss, you end on the moon. It's like, that's really all we hope for. And when you're generating compost, the biggest, and I mean the biggest catalyst to help compost faster is beneficial bacteria. And so when we are creating this compost, we're essentially housing beneficial bacteria and fungi. The beneficial bacteria and fungi is what does about 80 to 90% of the decomposition. It's not worms, those come in after. It's not pill bugs and other centipedes and creepy crawlies and slugs, those come in after. It's the beneficial bacteria. It's the nitrifying bacteria that actually break down and decompose, that then makes everything readily available and decomposed for the other insects to come in and kind of finish the job. So what are we gonna do? We're gonna add a starter. Check out how absolutely beautiful this compost is. This is probably some of the prettiest compost we've ever created. It is just so rich and loose and dark. And I'll tell you what, it smells incredible, absolutely incredible. This is what we're going to call sourdough. And if you've ever made bread before, you know you need a starter. So when you're making bread, it's oftentimes advised to use a starter. Now, a starter is just something we add, it's a catalyst, right? It helps to speed up the process. And so when you're making bread, you might use like a sourdough starter or use yeast. And in the case of making compost, our starter is going to be beneficial nitrifying bacteria. Now you can get that beneficial nitrifying bacteria from the soil, right? If you're composting and you already have finished compost, you can take a good amount. You can take a couple really big heaping scoops of compost, and that will actually help to inoculate a new pile that can help to add really good numbers, right? It's population size. The more nitrifying bacteria you have, the more aerobic activity and the more your compost is going to break down. That is the biggest reason why your compost either takes a little time or a long time. And that's because of how much aerobic nitrifying bacteria is in your compost. Now, when it comes to that starter, what happens if you don't have starter? Well, you need a decent amount of finished compost to act as a starter, or you can go out for just a couple bucks, go to a pet supply store and buy this stuff right here. This right here is known as Quick Start. It's essentially, you add it to fish tank water, and what it does is it actually contains live nitrifying bacteria, billions of it. It's really concentrated. And so even if I have a compost pile with finished compost, this right here will still really help me to not only speed up the process, but it is completely safe to use, and it's essentially our starter. It's what's going to help start and boost our compost. Now to drive this point home, if you take stuff like mulch or unfinished compost and you work it into your soil, it's always recommended that you don't do that because it robs nitrogen from your soil. Why does it rob nitrogen from your soil? Well, it's a process called nitrogen sequestration. Big word. Basically, it just means the nitrogen is being robbed. Well, who's robbing it? Well, the nitrifying bacteria. The nitrifying bacteria rob nitrogen to begin the breakdown process. Once the breakdown process has been finished, the nitrogen is then returned back into the compost. And so what we are doing is we're essentially adding lots, billions of nitrifying bacteria. How much? It's up to you. Doesn't really matter. What we're gonna do, this is like $5, by the way. So incredibly cheap. All we're going to do is take that, add it to some water. We're gonna water our compost. And what we're gonna do is we're adding billions and billions, if not potentially trillions, of nitrifying bacteria into our compost, which is then going to break down all of those complex compounds. It's going to help to break down the organic material. It's also going to inoculate our compost so that we have faster compost, much faster than you've ever thought were possible. Now, again, this is still going to take some flipping and rotating. If you just let it sit, it's going to cold compost because these beneficial bacteria, they are aerobic. You want activity. And so that's why you flip it. You add aeration, right? If you just let it sit, it's still going to take 3-6 months. But if you flip it, we're talking 3 to 5 weeks. 3 to 5 weeks. It's so much faster with a starter than you've ever thought possible. And so this is really beneficial. Some of you are probably thinking, man, maybe it's just a waste of time. That's fine too. Gardening is not a one-size-fits-all solution. But if you're someone that is composting in a compost tumbler, it's not coming in contact with the soil, you're gonna have even less nitrifying bacteria, even less. And so this is going to, again, this is something that any gardener anywhere can implement, really helps. And again, once you have that finished compost, you won't need to do this. You don't have to do this if you don't want to. You can use that finished compost as a starter, but it's like what came first, the chicken or the egg? This just helps to expedite the process. It helps to enhance your compost, help it compost faster, so that once you have it, then you can actually create your own starter with your own finished compost, and you won't have to use it again unless you want to, right? It's totally optional. That's what's so nice about gardening, right? But I'm just gonna water this down with that nitrifying bacteria. It's gonna soak into the compost, and then over time, I'm gonna flip it, I'm gonna work it, and that aeration is going to help them to multiply in number, continue to break down that compost in a really fast way. It's going to give us beautiful, rich, nutrient-rich, loose compost for us to use right in the garden. So I hope you guys enjoyed that quick little tip on how to speed up your compost using this really inexpensive little resource here. A lot of people would never ever think of turning to this, but I'll tell you what, this is a game changer with really helping your compost faster. And so I hope you try it. I hope it helps in some way. One additional little quick tip though is if you've got pets, a lot of people worry about creating those little green spots all over their lawn. If you got a dog or an animal that urinates in your lawn, before it has a chance to burn the grass or turn it green, urine is very, very high in ammonia. And this right here is nitrifying bacteria, which breaks down things like ammonia. And so that will actually help to reduce the burning and the dark green spots in your lawn. And so I hope you guys will try that as well. Just throw it in a watering can, water it on your lawn. This is so much cheaper than the stuff you're gonna find at the store for 20, 30 bucks. It's so much cheaper than compost starter, which if you go to a hardware store and buy compost starter, that's all you're buying is essentially an inoculant to start compost. You're buying the exact same thing, and this thing is like $5. So cheap, highly recommend it. Couldn't recommend it enough. And so as always, this is Luke from the MIgardener channel, reminding you to not only like this video if you did enjoy, share this video if you found it informative and fun. Let me know in the comments box down below if you have tried this and the results that you had with it. And as always, this is Luke from the MIgardener channel, reminding you to grow bigger. Take care. Bye. Hey, thank you so much for watching today's video. I really appreciate it. If you enjoyed, consider clicking this one. You'll probably enjoy it just as much. I want to thank you for your viewership because without it, this channel would not be as amazing as it is. Also, if you haven't subscribed, consider subscribing. It's free, and we upload videos every Monday, Wednesday, or Friday. We also have vegetable seeds, fertilizer, or tools. If you need any of those, consider visiting MIgardener.com. Links will be in the description box below. We've got you covered. And as always, we'll see you all in the garden. Take care. Bye.